May be seated. Shabbat Shalom. If you're ever looking for a book to read about contemporary American Judaism that's both entertaining and enlightening, I would recommend a book by the late Rabbi Richard Israel called The Kosher Pig. Okay, and it's a collection of essays that he wrote, most of which were published in Moment magazine. Okay, back like the old Moment magazine before. Anyway, the old and Rabbi Israel. So the story of the kosher pig. He tells this story of a observant Jewish man who had this rare disease, and his doctor told him that the only hope of, not really a cure, but he could live with his disease, was if he ate a little bit of pork every day. Okay, and now, if your doctor tells you you have to eat pork to live, halakha says, eat the pork, right? So he knew that, but he said, I'm not going to eat pork that's slaughtered in this cruel manner that the goy do, right? So what is he going to do? He's going to buy a knife, right? The knife, a halaf, the knife that the shochet uses, and he's going to buy a live pig, and he's gonna have the shochet chef his pig the way you do kosher slaughter, right? Which, I mean, as long as it's a new knife, it's not gonna affect anything, so why not? But of course, after you slaughter a four-footed animal, you have to inspect the lungs for signs of illness, because if the animal was sick, it's not kosher. So the shochet checks the pig, and he slaughters, he checks the lungs, and there's like a little something on the lung. And obviously, he's not exactly an expert on pig lungs. So he brings I don't know if he brings the pig to the rabbi, or the rabbi to the pig, but he has him check it. And Rabbi, is this pig kosher? And the rabbi says, kosher or not kosher, it's still a pig, right? But what Rabbi Israel meant when he said kosher pig questions are questions that he was asked that seem to be like questions of halakha, but were kind of outside that framework, okay? And I'll give you an example of a question that he was asked, that he wrote about, and then one that I was asked. Okay, the question that he was asked, people that he knew said, we're going for dinner to friends of ours, and they're not Jewish, and we know that she uses lard in her baking. And we don't want to offend her by not eating the dessert that she prepared. But now that we've eaten lard, can we have milk in our coffee, right? But you understand the question, right? Because, right, I've eaten meat. I mean, pork is meat, right? So he said, there's actually a halachic answer. The halachic answer is actually yes, because the rule of separating milk and meat only applies to kosher species. Right? It doesn't mean kosher meat, right? Like if you go to McDonald's and get a cheeseburger, that's worse than just getting a hamburger. Okay, but if you are having a ham sandwich, might as well have ham and cheese. It's not, and I don't want to hear anybody say, the rabbi said have ham and cheese, right? That's not what I meant, but halakhically, it's not actually worse to have ham and cheese than just ham. But it is halakhically worse to have a McDonald's cheeseburger than just a plain McDonald's hamburger, okay? But that's not what he said, because he said if you're aware enough of kashrut to ask the question, then you should be reminded of what kashrut entails. So no milk in your coffee after lard. Okay, now here's a question that I was asked when I was the Hillel rabbi at American University, and a very distinguished Jewish member of the faculty. She came to me, and her daughter was marrying a man who was not Jewish, and they had found a rabbi to officiate, a Reform rabbi, but the date that they wanted was during the Omer period, right? And when you're not supposed to get married. So she asked me, do you think Rabbi so-and-so will object to doing the wedding during the Omer? And that's really one I couldn't answer, because the only answer I could give her was ask him, right? I would not officiate at this wedding during the Omer, but I would also not officiate it, like, not during the Omer, right? So I'm the wrong guy to ask, right? But these are like the kosher pig type of questions that you're asked, a halachic question, like, I don't know, I'm a married woman, I'm having an affair with somebody, do I have to go to the mikveh before, the answer is like, but these are kosher pig type of questions, right? Now, if we were reading today the second part actually it was today's reading, and there's a commentary in Eitz Chaim that points out that there are only two places in the Torah that we're commanded not to eat pork. But there are many, many, many times that we are commanded not to gossip, right? Not to gossip. But like, whether you keep kosher or not, I don't think there's a Jew in the world who doesn't know that the Torah tells us not to eat pork, right? But lots of Jews seem not to know that the Torah tells us not to gossip, right? Because it's something that we do. I do it all the time. I know I shouldn't, but I know a lot of people who gossip, and let me tell you who they are. No, right? We all do it, right? We all do it, right? But I would also say that many people who didn't grow up at all observant, and they're starting to grapple with more observance. It's not universally the case, but for many people, they start grappling with some level of kashrut, right? I grew up, my home was glatt treif, right? The highest level of treif you can imagine, right? But when I was 14 years old, I stopped eating non-kosher species, right? So I would eat a McDonald's hamburger, but not a McDonald's bacon cheeseburger, right? And usually not even a McDonald's cheeseburger, although sometimes I did, right? But that was like the first really mitzvah that I started observing in a way that was more observant than my parents, right? But like kashrut, I mean, Shabbat, that was nowhere on my radar screen until my mid-20s, right? But I suspect, and I think that I could find data to back it up, that the percentage of conservative congregants who have kosher homes is higher than the percentage who come to shul regularly on Shabbat. Right? In other words, there's more people who have kosher homes but rarely come to shul than people who, let's say, regularly come to shul but don't have kosher homes. Or I believe that's so. I mean, there is data that shows 20 to 30% of conservative Jews have kosher homes, all right, which is higher than the percentage who come to shul pretty regularly on Shabbat, but I wouldn't even begin to hazard a guess like how many people in our shul or in any shul like wouldn't come to shul and then go shopping afterwards, right? Wouldn't come to shul and then play golf afterwards. Wouldn't come to shul and they're really busy at work, so they go into their office for a little bit, right? I mean, and again, I'm not saying, yes, great, do these things, but I'm not condemning people who do them, right? I mean, it's common in the community that we're part of, right? But why does the Torah tell us to keep kosher, right? And one of the greatest mistakes, I think, that Jewish thinkers did in the mid-1800s when they were trying to explain that Judaism was rational and makes sense. So they said, oh, these are health laws, right? These are health laws. They're not health laws, okay? You can keep very strictly kosher and eat a very unhealthy diet, right? I mean, a lot of traditional Jewish, I mean, you want to see that example, right? You want to see how to keep kosher and eat very unhealthy food? I recommend the Second Avenue Deli, right? It's not a healthy meal. It's not really a healthy meal, but it's strictly kosher. We're commanded to keep kosher because it makes us holy, right? God says very explicitly, you shall sanctify yourselves and be holy because I am holy, right? Therefore, because we represent God in the world, there are certain standards that we're told to uphold. And therefore, we have to be holy about not only what we eat, but about how it's produced, right? And so, for example, to go back to our friend with the kosher pig, right? Why? I'll put this back on. Why was he concerned about it? Why did he want to hire a shofet to chef the pig, right? Because kosher slaughter is more humane, right? And it's meant to be more humane. And if we're going to kill an animal for food, at least let's do it humanely, right? But every once in a while, you hear stories about a kosher slaughterhouse where up until the moment of slaughter, they treat the animals very cruelly. And they don't treat their workers well, right? And so people then say, well, I can't eat meat that was produced in that way, so I can't eat that meat, right? And, analogously, people say, well, my doctor told me I have to watch my sodium level, and kosher meat has more salt, therefore I can't eat kosher meat. And they'll come to me and they'll say, Rabbi, so I can eat non-kosher meat now, right? And no. If your doctor tells you you can't eat kosher meat, right? Or if your conscience tells you you can't eat kosher meat, then don't eat meat, right? But that's not a license to eat non-kosher meat, right? But there still is a difference between normative conservative practice and the practice of most of the Orthodox world, and that is glot kosher versus regular kosher. Okay, and glot kosher, and this again, I mean, there's like use of words in a way that does not mean what it's supposed to mean, right? Like if somebody tells you, oh yeah, that pizza place is glot kosher, I don't think so, okay? Because glot, right? I spoke about, again, our friend with the kosher pig, right? And the shochet had to check the lungs and he went, right? They check the lungs after they slaughter a four-legged animal, not chickens, okay? Which is another thing, right? You buy Empire chicken and it says glot kosher. Ain't nobody checking chicken lungs, okay? Most people assume glot kosher means like a higher standard, better supervision. That's not what it means, but that's exactly what the OU means when they say the chicken is glot kosher, because like nobody's checking chicken, I promise. Okay, so they check the lungs, and if the lungs are like obviously diseased, the animal's not kosher. So it winds up at McDonald's or Burger King. Right? They do, believe me, they do not throw it away. It is way too valuable, but they sell it as trade, right? But there's also like certain things on the lungs that look suspicious, but maybe they're okay, right? So there's a guy called the bodek, right? And the bodek, which means the checker, the inspector. So the bodek bodecks the lungs, right? And if he says they're okay, then it's kosher, but it's not glot kosher, okay? Because glot means smooth. So the lungs are smooth, and if the lungs are smooth, it's glot kosher. But if the bodek has to inspect it, and there's stuff on the lungs, but it doesn't render it trace, then that's regular kosher, right? But the norm in the Orthodox world today is glot kosher. We allow regular kosher, okay? And I will further say, if you have two products that are more or less identical, and one of them is glot kosher and one of them is regular kosher, I say to you, buy the regular kosher, right? Because regular kosher makes kosher meat more available, right? And glot kosher is, nobody kept glot kosher until, except Hasidim, until the 1960s, right? Nobody did, okay? If you grew up in a kosher home and you're my age or older, you grew up in a kosher home, I guarantee your grandparents ate regular kosher, unless they were Hasidim, right? But you can't really find regular kosher meat anymore because, frankly, the only people who buy regular kosher meat are conservative Jews who keep kosher, and the market of conservative Jews who keep kosher is not large enough to be economically viable, right? And for the fact of the matter is, Wegmans used to have regular kosher meat and they stopped carrying it. Why did they stop carrying it? Not enough people bought it to make it profitable, right? And so Trader Joe's used to have regular kosher meat and they don't anymore. Occasionally, and I'll tell you, you can find regular kosher meat by, okay? Like the only source of reliable kosher, regular kosher is what? Hebrew National, right? And we eat Hebrew National, we can serve Hebrew National here in the shul, right? But why is Hebrew National economically viable when the others aren't? Why? Because their market is not Jews, right? Their market is everybody, right? But, food should be not only ritually acceptable, but morally acceptable and ecologically acceptable, right? And the problem is that the market of people who care about both isn't large enough. Like a number of years ago, the conservative movement started this thing called Magen Tzedek, okay, which means shield of justice, or right, where it was supposed to be given to food that was kosher and also produced ethically without animal cruelty, et cetera, et cetera. Never took off because it wasn't like economically viable. Now in Israel, there is such a thing. It's called the Tav HaYosher. But certainly as a percentage of the population, more people in Israel keep kosher than here, right? But even the percentage of Israeli Jews who are not observant but still keep kosher is higher than it is here, right? So in Israel, there is the Tav HaYosher, but Magen Tzedek, it just never took off. And it's a shame because we should stand for ritual observance as well as ethics and morality. Yeah.
So if they're not selling regular kosher anymore, and that becomes regular meat, so more people are eating meat that was taken care of in a safer way, because all that non-blood.
Right, exactly, but yeah, you're right, but it's a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's not like you could go to McDonald's and say, I assume this hamburger was kosher slaughter.
Right, but I'm just saying there's more out there that we would eat, but that would be more ethically killed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I'll wrap up with this, and it's not directly related to what I said, but it is to your question, right? Because I hear this sometimes, oh, kosher food that was near non-kosher food, now it's not kosher anymore, right? Like the kosher chicken at Costco is in the same refrigerator case as the non-kosher chicken. That's not a problem, okay? Yeah, now people might pick up a non-kosher chicken by mistake. Well, that's your, right? it's your response, I mean, unless you're in Shalom's or Moki's or 7 Mile, it's your responsibility to make sure that every item has a hechsher that's acceptable to you, right? But, I tell when they say, well, it's not really kosher anymore because it was near non-kosher food. I mean, I hear this, right? I mean, I hear like even there was meat in that garbage can and then somebody threw dairy in the garbage can, right? It may be kosher garbage or trace garbage, but it's still garbage, right? But what? But the point is, you realize that kosher slaughterhouses sell much more trace meat than kosher meat, right? Because half of every cow is trace, plus all the cows that are slaughtered and found not to be kosher, right? They sell far more trace meat than kosher meat. And if that was really a thing, that kosher and trace in proximity, that's not kosher, there'd be no kosher meat anywhere in the world, right? So, but like I said, our truth is about making us holy, but therefore it should be like ritually kosher, but also ethically kosher. Shabbat shalom. Yeah.